this episode of China Uncensored, Malaysian Flight MH370 China to the rescue! Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been over a week since Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 vanished. As more time passes, hope begins to fade. But there is a bright side to all this. Yes, tragedies like this give us all pause to remember just how fragile human life is, and gives us the opportunity to set aside our differences and work together, not as nations, but as fellow human beings. But more importantly, this is a chance to show the American empire and all those other jerks in Southeast Asia just how much more awesomeness China can bring to the table. The Chinese regime is in full peacock mode. The authorities are pushing resources into the search for the missing Malaysian Airlines flight, and not just because the majority of the passengers were Chinese. If China's Navy can find the plane first, they can show that they are ready to be the dominant power in the Pacific instead of the U.S. Just days after the plane disappeared, the U.S. had 2 destroyers on the scene conducting search and rescue efforts, and nothing says rescue quite like 2 destroyers. Not to be outdone, Beijing sent in 4 warships, 5 Coast Guard and civilian patrols, helicopters, surveillance aircraft. 2 of those warships are the most advanced one in the Chinese fleet, weighing 20,000 tons of amphibious docking ship, more helicopters and small boats, hovercrafts. Pow! Yeah! You know, the Chinese government doesn't know how to make a good TV show or turn their state-sponsored singer into an international propaganda sensation, but they sure do know how to make a rescue effort look like a Michael Bay film. Look, it's understandable China doesn't want to be outdone in their own territorial waters, especially the Chinese territorial waters right next to Japan, India, Malaysia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. And so they've upped their military spending to almost $1.3 billion. And maybe, if they can put on a good show of all that military might in a search operation, all those other little countries in the South and East China Sea will think twice before they start complaining again that, oh, China is aggressively pushing into our territorial waters. Not only that, the Chinese regime needs to prove it can take care of its own citizens. As I said, most of the passengers on the Malaysian Airlines flight were Chinese. More Chinese than ever have been traveling abroad. Last year, that number was 100 million, more than double what it was in 2009. And since even the Chinese government has been complaining about how poorly they act abroad, they obviously see these tourists as an extension of how people abroad view the Chinese government. And while they're abroad, these tourists rely on Chinese authorities for protection, unlike in China where they need protection from Chinese authorities. Now, unfortunately, despite China's best efforts, when you get down to the bare-bone facts, the U.S. just spends way more on its military and can bring more hardware to the table. But does that mean China's just going to give up and be number 2? No way. They've got one more technique in their search efforts: criticizing other countries' search efforts. That'll show them just how great China is. Editorials have been slamming Malaysia and Chinese state-run media for not being transparent enough. As Xinhua said, when faced with catastrophe, honesty is human beings' best solution to finding a chance to prevent tragedies happening. Powerful state-sponsored words. Though I don't want to accuse the Chinese regime of maybe being a tiny bit hypocritical, but after the 2008 Sichuan earthquake, people started asking questions about whether government corruption could be blamed for all those schools that collapsed, killing thousands of children. Those people were arrested, beaten, and given long prison sentences. Authorities actually turned aid away because they didn't want outsiders in the region. Then there was the Wenzhou train crash where they buried the wreckage to quote-unquote protect China's technological secrets. But we did get a good idea about their burying capacity. Then they banned independent reports on the car bombing in Tiananmen Square last October and the recent Kunming stabbings because, as we all know, it was Uyghurs who did it. Can you please stop asking questions about it? And of course, plane crashes in China are considered highly sensitive, and usually media aren't even allowed to report on it. But no, Malaysia really could learn a thing or two about transparency. As for when China began searching its territory for the wreckage, if they've bothered to look in Tibet or Xinjiang, where things are a little unstable at the moment, but could possibly be where the plane ended up, or even the evidence they used to dismiss terrorist intent on the part of any of the 153 Chinese passengers on board, well, okay, those facts haven't been forthcoming, but hey, Malaysia, remember, Unless transparency is ensured, the huge international search operation can never be as fruitful as we hope and expect. Look, the point is, China is dominating the area, and nothing is going to get in the way of them showing just how much they care. And what's that, Fred? They think the plane turned west before it disappeared? Well, that would put it in the South Indian Ocean. That's no strategic value to China. Hey, you know, this really is an international issue, so it's really time for the other 25 countries involved in the search efforts to really step up their game. China's out of here.